Hello everyone and welcome to another video on Ragnarok Online Origin. Today we'll be covering limited edition pets. There's not a lot of guides out there talking about all the available LE pets for the users to use, what sort of scenarios they're good in, what do you use on your equipment and so forth. So I hope that this guide will be helpful for everyone as they are a very important part in PvP, and if you are using the wrong pet combo or the wrong pets, you're going to be a lot weaker than you should be. So let's check out all the pets first, and then we're going to be talking about how you can use them and in what sort of scenarios. So the first is a very underrated pet, I would say. Not a lot of people have this maxed, but it is still a very strong pet nonetheless, especially for PvP. We're talking about the Rocker Bully. Rocker Bully is a support pet that provides a lot of AoE debuff and also anti-healing and damage reduction just based off his skill Death Solo alone. With Death Solo, you can reduce enemy healing taken by up to 100%, increasing your allies' demi-human damage to those targets by 24% and reducing final damage done by enemies by 30%. So that is a lot of damage reduction from the Rocker Bully, and with the Pact you also get an additional 50% damage reduction from brute and demi-human races, and also another 25% reduction from opponents' non-status damage. Not to mention, when you use the Death Solo with the maxed out Pact on the Rocker Bully, you also are able to cast Immobilize and Silence on your opponent. So Rocker Bully is a very underrated but still a very useful pet, especially for supports like Genetics or Wanderers or even Priests, as they provide a lot of survivability and AoE debuffs. So definitely not a pet you want to sleep on. The equipment set you want to use this on the Rocker Bully is definitely the Divine Gift, just to allow it to survive a little bit longer. The second set doesn't really matter, and the most important sort of substats you want on those sets are actually the cooldown reduction and HP if possible. Everything else doesn't really matter. So there you have it. That is the Rocker Bully. I wouldn't recommend using it unless you have at least tier 3. So if you don't have a tier 3 Rocker Bully, it's definitely out of the books for you, as it is just a little bit too weak. Next up, we're going to be talking about one of the best defensive pets available in the game. It is Huan. Huan provides a lot of shield, just raw shield to the owner, and it converts 30% of Huan's AM attack to the owner, which can be increased by just increasing Huan's AM attack, of course. And when you have it at a higher tier, it also gives an additional 40% of the owner's max HP. So Huan is able to provide a huge burst shield that can cover nearly your entire HP bar. When you have the tier 10, Huan also converts your armor to holy, which also allows you to reduce all elemental damage except for neutral and shadow and undead by another 25%. And finally, when your shield breaks, you also get another 95% damage reduction and also endure and move speed for another 5 seconds. So Huan definitely one of the most important defensive survivability pets out there. Usually, unless you have a tier 10 and Pact tier 25 Huan, you are at most getting 1 shield out of Huan before it dies in a large scale fight. But if you get it to maxed out Huan, which is tier 10 and Pact tier 25, and if you have enough cooldown reduction, you have the ability to get 2 shields off of Huan before Huan loses its invulnerability. So definitely something that you need to get really prioritize on your pacts, because the tier 25 is absolutely insane on Huan. Huan is already usable on tier 3 as it already starts to provide a great amount of shield, and not to mention with the Pact you also get additional 22% skill damage, another 20% max HP shield. You also get 40% damage reduction from all sides, 60% P damage and M damage increase, another 60% damage reduction from all races, and when your shield breaks, no single damage source per hit basically can exceed 25% of max HP. So that really prevents you from being burst down from full HP if you have the Huan. So definitely a pet that nearly everybody should look for if they're looking for a defensive pet that allows them to survive longer, and definitely one of the most important pets for supports. Next up, we're going to be looking at a pet for DPS, nearly only for DPS here. This is the Antasha Beta. Antasha Beta basically casts an AoE damage that we don't really care about the damage that it casts, but the most important thing is you need the pack tier 20 on the Antasha. The Antasha, when you have pack tier 20, when it casts Radiant Dissension, you deal 8,000 of Antasha B's P attack as damage. That's why a perfectly built Antasha B can deal a lot of damage, and it also ignores enemies P-Def, M-Def, and also PvP damage reduction. So this pet in PvP, if you build it correctly, can one-shot a lot of people. You want to look for P attack percent on your equipment set, and also P damage percent, and also pack tier 20 is non-negotiable here for the Antasha B. You need that for the huge damage reduction versus all size that it reduces from your opponents, as well as of course the burst damage, and not to mention the 100% anti-healing that Antasha B provides with the funnel strike. So Antasha B, if you're looking for burst damage, Antasha B is really great for DPS that really wants to burst people down. Jobs like Guillotine Crosses or like Warlocks, any class that really highlights being able to burst people down, Antasha B is probably the best pet for those. So definitely want to look out for this pet if you are really lacking of the damage, because Antasha B can also make up a bunch of the damage. Next up, we're going to be talking about one of the only pet that becomes stronger when you use it with another pet, that is the Genesis. Now, Genesis is one of those pets that a lot of people have probably already maxed out just because, you're playing as a DPS, but in contrary to popular belief, the Genesis is also a great support pet. Why? Let me tell you why it is that way. So a Genesis has a skill called Gaze of Salvation, which when the owner takes fatal damage, the Genesis will sacrifice itself and restore the owner's HP by 30%. Basically an Osiris card built in your pet. Now that is not it. I mean, if you read Genesis skill, it is a long wall of text, but I'm just going to break it down and also summarize everything for you so you know the main parts of Genesis and why it is one of those pets that you cannot use by itself in PvP. Now, Genesis, if you use it with Nemesis, when Nemesis is also deployed, not assisted, it must be deployed. It can be not active, but it must be deployed. So when you use Genesis with Nemesis, when you trigger Gaze of Salvation, which is the Osiris skill on Genesis, when you trigger that skill, the owner gains an additional 80% P damage reduction and M damage reduction, and heals by another 25% of the owner's HP. So the owner basically heals 55% damage, 55% of his HP, and also gains a big chunk of reduction from the Genesis. And if the Nemesis is deployed, the owner gets another 1.5 seconds of invincibility. So that allows the owner to survive even longer and potentially be able to escape after the Genesis dies, casting the Gaze of Salvation. Not just that, Genesis also provides a lot of AoE stuns when the Mystic Feathers are at full stack. It also provides a huge boost in P attack and M attack. We're talking about 50% P attack and M attack increase, and also 35% P damage and M damage increase for the owner, and not to mention also buffing party members by another 10% P damage and M damage, and also giving the owner 15% HP and 35% P damage and M damage reduction. Not to mention, if the Genesis dies, it also casts Deep Freeze in an AoE. That's on the pack tier 25. So that is everything you ever wanted on a pet in a pet. So that is a lot of survivability, gives you big chunk of damage, not to mention a good decent crowd control as well. So If you have shared bond, which is if you have Genesis and Nemesis both deployed, the Genesis also regains HP per second, so it is very hard to kill. Now there's a slight typo here in this slide here. We're not looking for P attack, P damage, or whatever. We are only looking for cooldown reduction. So that's one thing. That's the only thing you want on Genesis, or except HP, of course. So HP and cooldown reduction is the primary substats you're looking for on your Genesis. So Genesis is one of those pets that a lot of people have been focusing, or probably already maxed out first, just because of its well-roundedness. You can use that on DPS, you can use that on supports, and you can use them as crowd control. Genesis provides a lot of benefits to the users. Next, we're going to be talking about the other pair, which is the Nemesis. Now, Nemesis is the defensive version of the Genesis, but it doesn't provide anything offensive in a way. It does reduce the opponent's P damage and M damage by up to a total of 105%. So opponent has a minus 105% P damage, M damage bonus. It also allows the owner to redirect damage he or she takes to the Nemesis. So essentially, the Nemesis is a walking genetic, casting devotion on the owner. 50% of your damage is redirected to the Nemesis, and then Nemesis then reduces it further by 80% so that it survives a lot longer. Not to mention, when the Nemesis casts Black Whirlwind, it is untargetable, so it allows the Nemesis to survive a lot longer while also soaking a huge chunk of damage for the owner. So Nemesis is the pet that sacrifices itself for you in a different way than the Genesis. You want it to stay alive as long as possible, because the longer Nemesis stays alive, the more damage reduction that it's able to provide. Not to mention the blinds that the Nemesis does inflict with the Black Whirlwind is very, very annoying. The Genesis also reduces the opponent's damage versus all size by 27%, and also 16% damage to all race reduction from the opponent. So Nemesis is the one true pet that you really want there if you are just looking out to survive. However, because of the huge buffs you get with shared bond, which is basically deploying both the Genesis and Nemesis, I personally do not recommend using Nemesis by itself without the Genesis. I'll explain a little bit later on towards the end of this video. Next up, we're going to be talking about probably the worst LE pet available in the game right now. It is the Vampirro. Now, Vampirro is a very interesting pet because it doesn't do a lot of debuffs. It doesn't increase the damage of the owner by a lot, but its niche is actually through healing. Whenever Vampirro does damage, it heals both himself and the owner, which sounds very interesting, but because of the pet's damage not being very too high, unless you are already way above your opponent, you're not going to be getting too much healing from the Vampirro. Now, the Vampirro does have one benefit, which is allowing the owner basically to get unlimited shields as long as the Vampirro is full HP and over healing, which provides the owner with shield every time it is over healed. So you can pair the Vampirro up with something like double initiative on your Nightingale, for example, but it is not a very fantastic pet just because the heals are really not that much. Now, the other bonuses that Vampirro give is such as providing an additional up to 24% M damage to the owner, which is not huge compared to other pets. It also provides up to 20% P attack, M attack bonus, and also 15% final damage reduction towards the owner, which is again decent but not huge. An additional 11% of the owner's max HP is also being dealt as damage to the opponent when you have the maxed out pet pack at tier 25, and it also heals the owner for 50% of that damage. So Vampirro 25 is definitely interesting. It provides you additional damage, much like the Cosmic Sigil, but on its own, Vampirro is a little bit lackluster, at least from what we've been able to test out. Now, if you have better results with the Vampirro, do let me know in the comment section below, and we'll see how we can adapt Vampirro to become more usable in different scenarios. Now, Vampirro does have an anti-burst mechanic as well for the owner. If the owner takes a single hit of damage exceeding 35% of the owner's max HP, the owner is immune to the next 8 instances of damage. So the owner has a slight chance of, surviving high burst classes like GX or Warlock, which makes Vampirro very interesting. But in real fights, it's really difficult to get that get that bonus and use it efficiently. So that's why Vampirro is probably the least used LE pet out there. Next, we'll be talking about Hati. Now, Hati is one of the more underrated pets as well. This good boy is pretty OP in my opinion, but he is, like the Rocker Bully, is pretty underused for most people. Now, let me explain why Hati is good, or at least try to explain why Hati is good in my eyes. Now, Hati reduces the opponent's P damage and M damage bonus by 30%. It deals an additional 25% skill damage if the opponent is shielded, and it also reduces the opponent's healing taken by 35%. Now, those are decent debuffs on the enemy, but that's not all. Hati also provides direct status effects to the opponents. It can cast fear and also paralyze and curse on the opponent. So Hati is a really, by itself, provides a lot of crowd control just based off its skills alone. Now, at the max tier of Hati, it also converts the opponent's healing taken. Whatever healing that the opponent is receiving, it converts it to damage. So not just preventing the opponent from healing, it is also converting that healing to damage, which makes Hati a very interesting pet for DPS or even for supports. Supports can also use the Hati as a pet, but usually a more offensive support like the RG, like Suno supports, or even like Wanderers, anything that wants crowd control and also providing just great overall debuffs to the opponents. When you have the pack tier maxed out for Hati, the most important bonus you get on the owner is also up to 32% P attack and M attack. Not to mention, if the opponent has no shield, it gives a bonus of 65% skill damage bonus to the enemy without shields for 8 attacks. So that allows a bigger burst potential for the owner. So Hati is both great for classes that needs the CC, classes that do not like opponents running away, like sorcerers, like Night Watch. You kind of want the opponents to be standing still, or even for classes that want to burst people down, like the GX or Warlock. You want them to stay still and also burst them down with the bonus skill damage from Hati. Now, the only downside of Hati is that it doesn't really provide a lot of sustained survivability directly. It doesn't provide shields, it doesn't provide healing, and you kind of need at least tier 8 for the Hati to be usable. So if you do not have a tier 8 Hati, I definitely do not recommend using it. Packs are also very important for the Hati, so you kind of want it as high as possible. So Hati, a pet that is not for everyone, but if you have it high enough and on the right class, it can be very annoying by itself. Next up, and finally, we'll be talking about the most OP pet, the strongest defensive pet in the game currently available right now. That's the Fox Miko. That's the latest pet that has been introduced to the game, and let me tell you why. Fox Miko at tier 5 does cast Bewitch on an AoE. So that is 2 to 4 seconds, depending on the tier of your Miko, that the opponent is basically controlled. Now, during this trance, during this Bewitch, you have 5 seconds of the opponent's reduced damage bonus versus all size, and also damage reduction versus all size by 30%. So after the Bewitch, they also have that reduced damage by 30% to all size and race. The owner also gets 25% max HP and 30% damage bonus to all size and 30% damage reduction versus all size to the owner. So not just increasing the owner's damage, but also survivability at the same time. Another bonus effect from Fox Miko is that for every 10% HP loss of the owner takes up to 50% non-status damage taken. So depending on the amount of HP already lost, it gains more non-status damage taken reduction. So up to 50%. So if the owner is 50% HP, it reduces damage taken by 50%. That is a huge damage reduction. And when the shield breaks for Fox Miko, the owner also gets a 3-second immunity to all status effects. Not to mention when the shield breaks, you also get the Fox Miko also converts the owner is also being able to convert the Fox Miko's HP to shield again. So 20% of the shield of the pet's HP is taken away to be changed into shield. So again, kind of like Vampirro, which Miko provides you constant shields until the Miko dies or until you die, which makes it very, very strong. Now, when you have it on pack tier 25 as well, Fox Miko also allows the owner to heal 10% on attack for a few seconds. It also increases the element skill damage and element skill reduction on the owner by up to 50%. And Fox Miko, when it casts the trance, it also decreases the opponent's P damage or M damage bonus by a huge percentage. I'm talking about 100 to 200%. This depends on the opponent's P damage and M damage bonus, of course, but it is a huge, large chunk of reduction. The minimum is 30%, and it can go up to 200% reduction just from the Fox Miko alone. Now, that is all the LE pets that are currently available in game. We've kind of talked about each and every one of their uses and their combos, and each of their uses and their equipments. But let's talk about the pet combos. What pets go well with each other, and what classes sort of use them. Now, firstly, there's the general pet combination, which can be used for everyone, like DPS, like support. That is the Genesis, Nemesis, the Huan, and the Miko. This is pretty much nearly an all-out sort of defensive lineup. It provides you, of course, still decent amount of damage. It does provide you a huge chunk of survivability on all of these 4 pets. You cannot obviously replace any one of these with the Hati or the with the Antasha B if you like one of these pets, or you don't have one of these pets at a high tier. So this is the general pet combination that we do see. Next up, we also... How do I remove this? I have no idea, chat. Anyways, next up, we also have the more burst heavy pet lineup, which is with Genesis, Nemesis, of course, as a well-rounded duo. These 2 pets, you sort of can use them anywhere you want. But if you're looking for high burst or high crowd control, or just being able to kill your opponents as quickly as possible, you definitely want to put in the Antasha beta and the Hati in there. Now, again, same thing like the general DPS set. You kind of can mix in between the Miko and the Juan to replace either one of them if you feel like you need a little bit more survivability. But if you're talking about full burst, then you definitely want both of them together. Now, the third sort of pet combination is mostly for supports. Now, you can use the Juan, the Miko, of course, these 2 pets, great for survivability, but pairing it with the Hati as well as the Rocker Bully, you're also being able to provide huge amounts of area control and CC to your opponents. Now, you can switch in the Nemesis with this pet combination, but I personally, again, like I said earlier in the video, I do not like using Nemesis by itself, just because if you compare Nemesis by itself to another pet any other pet by itself, the Nemesis actually loses out. Nemesis is strong when you pair it with Genesis, but without the Genesis, Nemesis is actually a lot squishier than you realize, especially in large-scale fights. So that is definitely something that you want to look out for. Now, of course, if you have no other choice, you can always put in the Nemesis back in, but these are the considerations that you have to take if you are looking at these pet combinations. Now, that enough being said, oops. This is the eraser, there you go. Enough being said, that is going to be all for this short, I say short, but it's still a 25-minute video. That's all for this short pet combination or just pet introduction video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something from this. We kind of broke down each of these individual pets and where you can use them. But until then, guys, that is going to be all from me. This is Zero, and we'll be seeing each other soon. See you guys in the next video. Peace out.